Welcome to techaily.ai. Today we're unpacking a really key question for anyone building a home server, Ubuntu or Proxmox.
Yeah, it comes up a lot.
It really does. And the debate, it's surprisingly nuanced, isn't it? We're going to dive into why some really experienced users, they stick with Ubuntu even after trying Proxmox.
Right, while others absolutely swear by the integrated approach you get with Proxmox.
Exactly. You're about to uncover some fascinating insights that go beyond just the surface specs. It reveals that your choice of server OS, it often says more about your tech philosophy than you might think.
That's absolutely right. Our mission today really is to explore those nuances.
Yeah.
Why someone might pick one over the other, maybe even a clever combination.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about finding like a single best answer. It's more about understanding the implications for how you build and manage your own home lab environment and, ultimately find the right fit for your specific needs.
Okay, before we get into those deeper layers, though, a quick word from our sponsor. This deep dive is brought to you by StoneFly.
Good folks over at StoneFly.
Yeah, they're your trusted solution provider and advisor in, well, pretty much everything enterprise data, storage, backup disaster recovery, hyper-converged setups for VMware, Hyper-V, Proxmox clusters too,
Right. AI servers, SA365.
turnkey security appliances, and they support both public and private cloud solutions. You can find out more at stonefly.com.
Definitely worth checking out.
So let's unpack this. We recently encountered a very compelling perspective. It was from someone who consistently goes back to Ubuntu Linux for their home server,
Even after trying Proxmox.
even after extensive trials with
Really?
Proxmox. Yeah. And they lay out 5 key reasons for this preference. It really outlines like a specific philosophy for how they like to manage their tech.
Okay, interesting. And for this person, it sounds like it really boils down to, well, ultimate flexibility, right?
Right.
And a strong emphasis on ease of use, but specifically ease of use within their existing workflow.
Ah, okay. Workflow is key.
Yeah, and compatibility with their specific tools. What's interesting here is just how personal that choice of a server OS can be. It's often driven by, skills you already have, how much control you want.
Or even just liking tinkering.
Exactly. The sheer enjoyment someone gets from like hands-on configuration.
Let's start with that customization and control angle then. Our source loves that Ubuntu lets them build their server exactly how they want it. But doesn't building everything from scratch also mean like a steeper learning curve?
Yeah.
Or maybe more potential to mess things up, especially if you're newer to home labs?
Well, that's a fair point to consider, yeah.
Mhm.
And for some, definitely the initial setup can be more involved, no doubt.
Okay.
However, for those folks who really value understanding every single layer of their system, or maybe they need to optimize for some very specific niche workload,
Right.
that upfront investment, that time spent setting it up manually, it can really pay dividends down the line.
Yeah.
This individual they describe starting with a truly minimal Ubuntu install, like really minimal.
Bare bones.
Exactly. So they avoid any unnecessary overhead. No pre-configured hypervisor, no big web management stack, unless they consciously choose to install it themselves.
Okay.
And this approach, it gives them complete granular control over everything: system services, security settings, performance tuning.
Everything.
They feel totally in charge. Doesn't matter if they're running Docker containers, setting up Kubernetes, or even just some lightweight VMs with KVM. They explicitly said they're not logged into the architecture or defaults of a platform like Proxmox.
So for them, a big part of it isn't just does it work? It's almost like this digital craftsmanship philosophy, building something precisely, knowing every piece.
That's a good way to put it, knowing exactly what's running and why.
Okay, next point. Comfort and familiarity. Our source mentioned using Linux on the desktop, other projects for years, administering Ubuntu servers. It sounds like their existing knowledge just carries right over. But, for someone who's maybe more used to a polished web interface, wouldn't Proxmox's graphical tools be, well, quicker, a faster way to get things done?
This point really hits home how much an existing knowledge base shapes preferences. It's huge.
Yeah.
For this individual, managing an Ubuntu server just fits. It slots right into their established workflow.
Yeah.
They're already good with command line tools. They know apt inside and out for packages.
And the community support?
Oh, absolutely. They can leverage those massive community resources for Ubuntu. Now, Proxmox, yeah, it definitely have its own powerful web interface, great tools. But for this person, it sometimes feels like an extra layer of abstraction.
gets in the way.
Sometimes, yeah. According to them, it occasionally gets in the way of how they prefer to manage things directly. They just like using SSH, simple scripts they can reuse, maybe keep and git.
Version control their setup.
Exactly.
Right.
Which they see as more efficient, once you're comfortable living in the terminal.
And you mentioned that huge community support for Ubuntu. You just can't underestimate that, can you? When you hit a weird networking snag at 2 a.m. or trying to tune something specific?
Oh, absolutely not.
Knowing you can probably find a guide or a forum post for almost anything, that's incredibly comforting.
It's a massive advantage.
Okay, let's talk containers. Huge part of modern development, self-hosting. They let you package things up nicely.
Yep, super important now.
Our source specifically says Ubuntu offers better support and smoother operation for things like Docker and Kubernetes. This focus on containers, it's not just a tech choice, is it? It kind of reflects how modern software is built.
Exactly. I mean, if you're a home labber and you want to mirror what's happening in professional dev environments or run the latest microservices, then having really solid native container support, it becomes less about just convenience and maybe more about future-proofing and just aligning with how things are done now. What's critical here, according to this perspective, is having direct access to up-to-date kernel versions and container runtimes right there on Ubuntu.
The latest stuff.
Yeah, that can be super important for running the newest versions of Docker or container or whatever without hitting weird compatibility problems. The view is that installing and managing these tools on Ubuntu is just, more straightforward.
Why's that?
Mostly thanks to official packages being readily available, tons of documentation. It's just well-trodden ground. Now, Proxmox can absolutely run containers, right? It has its own LXC containers built in.
Right, LXC.
But this user's experience suggests it feels more optimized for managing virtual machines. So look, if your main goal is rock-solid VM hosting, Proxmox is, as they admit, hard to beat.
Fair enough.
But for this user, the flexibility and maybe the perceived performance for containers on Ubuntu just felt like a better match for the stuff they run day to day.
So it really boils down to your primary use case again. If you're building a home lab and it's all about containers, this user found Ubuntu felt more natural, maybe even more performant for them.
That seems to be their conclusion, yeah.
All right, storage. Often the unsung hero, right? Silently holding all your precious data. It's also where, speaking for myself, I've learned some hard lessons about backups.
Oh, haven't we all?
Our source loves to experiment here. Different file systems, RAID setups, storage backends. How does Ubuntu help with that kind of deep dive flexibility for data?
Well, this raises that important question again. How much direct control do you, the user, actually want over how your data is structured underneath? Our source explains that Ubuntu gives them complete freedom here. Configure storage exactly how they see fit. Now, Proxmox is actually quite good at managing storage pools, has excellent built-in features.
Yeah, ZFS support and stuff.
Right, exactly. But its design kind of assumes you'll be using its built-in layers like ZFS or OVM to manage your VM disks.
Yeah.
That's the Proxmox way. And while you can work around those assumptions, this individual finds that doing so can sometimes add complexity because you're kind of fighting the native way it wants to work.
Right, working against the grain.
Yeah. With Ubuntu, they can just use the standard Linux tools and file systems directly. So, for example, easily setting up BTFs maybe for snapshotting Docker data, or just a simple software RAID for a media server.
Without fighting the hypervisor.
Precisely. The key is not being limited by the specific choices or the design patterns of a platform that's really focused on hypervising first. It's like being a digital chef, choosing every single ingredient yourself.
Instead of just ordering off the Proxmox menu.
Kind of, yeah. That's a decent analogy.
So it sounds like for those who really like to tinker, get their hands dirty with storage configs, Ubuntu offers that kind of blank, unconstrained canvas.
Yeah.
Allows for real experimentation.
That seems to be the appeal for that type of user, yes.
And finally, number 5, automation. Making a server setup consistent, repeatable, efficient, automation's a huge win.
Oh, absolutely. Saves so much time and potential error.
Our source automates as much as possible. Home server setup, maintenance, using tools like Ansible and Terraform.
Yeah, this speaks right to the core principles of efficiency, consistency, managing any system, really, whether it's one server at home or a whole data center.
So how does Ubuntu help here compared to Proxmox?
Well, Proxmox does have an API, right?
Sure.
And it definitely supports automation. But this user notes that for some tasks, You still might need to interact with its web interface or utilize its specific tools,
Okay.
which can sometimes feel like an extra step or maybe just a slightly different workflow you have to learn and integrate.
Yeah.
In contrast, with Ubuntu, pretty much everything can be managed through standard Linux mechanisms. Command line, config files.
The usual suspects.
Exactly. And this makes it incredibly easy to integrate with broader automation workflows you might already have, like if you're already using Ansible.
Yeah.
You can use Ansible playbooks to install Docker, configure firewall rules, deploy your services, monitor health, all without having to worry about managing a separate web layer or learning a specialized API just for the hypervisor.
It keeps it all Linux native, basically.
Yeah, that's the idea. It helps them keep their server setup simple, consistent, and again, fully under their control.
Okay, so if your existing workflow is already heavy on those standard Linux automation tools, Ubuntu might feel like a more seamless fit, less context switching.
It could feel that way, yeah. Less friction.
So, okay, we've heard a really strong case for Ubuntu there. Coming from a user who values that ultimate control, familiarity, a container-first approach, and deep integration with their automation tools.
Yep, a very clear philosophy.
But the beauty of doing a deep dive like this is looking at multiple perspectives, right? So what else did we find? Well, what's the broader conversation, especially from the community, saying about this?
This is where it gets really interesting because the community, as always, adds crucial context and a lot of nuance.
Like what?
Well, first off, many people highlight that comparing Ubuntu directly to Proxmox might be like comparing, apples and pears.
How so?
Because Proxmox is fundamentally a hypervisor. Its whole reason for being is to efficiently run multiple virtual machines. That's its core strength, its design center. And that's just a different beast than a general-purpose OS like Ubuntu.
Okay, that's a fair point. It's built for virtualization first and foremost.
Exactly.
And some folks pointed out, you don't necessarily have to choose, do you? One really compelling perspective we saw was basically, why pick only one? Just use Proxmox to virtualize Ubuntu.
Bingo. Yeah, that's a super common and often very powerful approach for a lot of people.
Really? How well does that work?
Pretty darn well, actually.
Yeah.
Some argue Proxmox can run an Ubuntu server VM almost as fast as bare metal. Like maybe 95% of bare metal speeds, they estimate.
Wow, okay.
And you still get the ability to run any other VMs you might want right alongside it, all managed by Proxmox. Plus, they emphasize Proxmox's user interface makes stuff like snapshotting VMs, backing them up.
Oh yeah, snapshots are gold.
They are, and Proxmox makes that far easier than the tools you get by default on Ubuntu itself. It gives you this robust, convenient management layer on top.
Which could be a huge time saver.
Yeah.
And maybe a stress reducer for a lot of users.
Definitely.
And for some people, Proxmox really is that one-stop shop, isn't it? Especially if you've got decent server hardware, lots of RAM and CPU.
Right.
It can simplify deployment, monitoring, just less manual work overall, which is a big plus if you just want an integrated virtualization solution that works out of the box.
Absolutely. But there are also those specific cases where Ubuntu on bare metal might still be strongly preferred, even beyond just the philosophy.
Like what?
Well, for instance, one person mentioned they moved off Proxmox to Ubuntu because they needed a powerful workstation setup where containers could get direct bare metal level access to the GPU.
GPU pass-through or direct access.
Yeah, something like that, which was apparently a challenge for them within Proxmox's virtualization layer at the time. Might be easier now, but it was a factor for them.
Okay, specific hardware needs.
Right. And someone else mentioned Fedora Server as an alternative, maybe with Cockpit or another tool installed for web-based VM management. So, a different flavor of flexibility without needing full-blown Proxmox.
Interesting. And what about the storage debate? We heard the argument for flexibility on Ubuntu.
Yeah, but there's a strong counterpoint there, too. Many argue that ZFS, which Proxmox integrates with so well, is just flat out superior to BTRFs, which our original source liked on Ubuntu, especially when it comes to reliability and data is correct guarantees.
Data integrity.
Exactly. ZFS is famous for its advanced data integrity features like checksumming, self-healing. It gives you extra layers of assurance that your data is actually safe and correct, which highlights, different priorities again.
Reliability versus flexibility, maybe.
Or different approaches to achieving both. It really reinforces that both platforms have their own sweet spots, their own ideal use cases. If you don't need a tier 1 virtual environment, maybe your main concern is just direct control.
Then Ubuntu bare metal might be fine.
Perfectly sufficient, yeah. But if managing multiple VMs efficiently is core to what you want to do, Proxmox might be the ideal setup. maybe even running Ubuntu inside a VM on Proxmox.
The hybrid approach again?
Yeah, maybe using ZFS on the Proxmox host underneath for that robust data management and mirroring. And it's also worth noting, there's a whole community building helper scripts for Proxmox now.
Oh, yeah.
For doing like one-click container installs within Proxmox, which kind of pushes back a bit on the idea that containers are always inherently easier or more flexible only on Ubuntu.
So the lines can blur depending on community tooling, too.
Exactly. It really shows how versatile both platforms can be depending on how you approach them.
Okay, so this deep dive, it really reveals there's no single best home server OS that fits everyone. It really depends on your priorities, doesn't it? Your skills, how you like to approach your tech.
Totally.
Whether you prefer getting your hands dirty or having a more managed experience.
Absolutely. If you're someone who values that absolute control, you enjoy the manual config,
Yeah.
you've already got Linux command line skills down.
And maybe containers are your main thing.
Yeah, and your primary workload is heavy on containerization, then Ubuntu might align perfectly, just like it did for that individual whose case we explored.
Right. On the other hand, if your main goal is efficiently managing multiple VMs, maybe lots of different OCs, and you really appreciate having a solid web interface, plus those powerful built-in features like easy snapshots and backups.
Then Proxmox offers a very, very compelling one-stop shop solution. It streamlines a lot of that complexity for you.
Makes sense.
Ultimately, yeah, the choice comes down to what fits your technical comfort zone, how much hands-on control you actually want, and the specific kinds of services or projects you plan to run on your home server. Both are incredibly powerful, super capable.
But different philosophies.
Exactly. They just cater to slightly different philosophies of server management and, well, different sets of user needs.
So as we've seen, the best choice isn't about some universal answer. It's really about finding what fits your needs, your style.
Couldn't agree more.
And ultimately, your home server choice, whether it ends up being Ubuntu, Proxmox, or something else entirely it often reflects something deeper, doesn't it? Like your philosophy about control, convenience, your place in the wider tech community.
That's a great way to think about it.
It's kind of a journey of discovery and mastery, not just ticking a box.
It really is a deeper question than just which one is better, isn't it? It's about how you prefer to interact with your technology, how you want to master it, and what kind of journey you want that home lab to be.
Well said. And that wraps up our deep dive for today. A big thank you for joining us on techaily.ai, where we try to help you cut through the noise and get to the core of what matters.
Hope this exploration gave you some valuable insights into this whole dynamic world of home server choices.
And remember, this deep dive is brought to you by StoneFly, offering robust solutions for your data needs. And speaking of incredible storage deals, you'll definitely want to hear about this. StoneFly is offering a 100 TB immutable and air-gapped SSO NES for just $8,995.
Wow, 100 terabytes, immutable and air-gapped for under $9,000. That's a serious offering.
It really is a significant option if you need truly secure and robust storage. Check them out at stonefly.com.
We hope this exploration empowers you to make informed decisions for your own setup, whatever you choose.
Join us next time for another deep dive into the topics that keep you well informed and hopefully curious.